Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Hi everyone, this is The Team House, episode 107. I'm Jack Murphy, here with Dave Park. We are here tonight with 2nd Ranger Battalion veteran Tony Brooks. He is the author of a new book, Leave No Man Behind. It's out now. You can go find it wherever books are sold, on Amazon. There's an ebook. Go out there and take a look. It is about Tony's career as a Ranger, with a big focus on the follow-up to Operation Red Wings, which many of you know from the Lone Survivor film, where a SEAL platoon got ambushed, and Marcus Luttrell was the lone survivor out there on the in the mountains of Afghanistan. And there's, of course, a big effort mobilized to try to recover Marcus and to recover the remains of the SEALs that perished out there in that operation. And Tony was one of the Rangers who participated in that recovery mission. So, Tony, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to have another second back guy here, to be honest with you.
I told him you guys could touch your tips.
Yep, sword fight, it's coming.
Yeah. Hey, it's only natural. It just shows camaraderie. Funny enough, Tony and I, when we were talking, and actually I read it in the book, but his old platoon sergeant we were in the sniper section together when I was, so that kind of dates me. So Tony, one of the things that we like to ask everybody at the beginning of our show is, like any superhero, you probably have come from humble beginnings. And what is your origin story? Where do you come from? What got you interested in the military? You know, start as young as you want.
Yeah, I was never one that thought I would be in the military. I was always the nerdy kid who did well in school. I was somewhat of an athlete, but nothing extraordinary. My younger brother actually was a military buff. Like he would sit and watch the History Channel constantly, and he used to always tell me, after we'd get in our fisticuffs, he would say, I'm going to be an Army Ranger someday. And it's like, yeah, whatever. I don't know what that is, but okay. And I think that was the original seed that was planted. But ultimately, the reason I became a Ranger, one, was 9/11. 9/11, I was a freshman in college, and it shook me up pretty bad, and I was pissed off. So this was my way to kind of get back at the enemy, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And of course, Pat Tillman was a huge influence. Black Hawk Down came out right after 9/11. Mm-hmm. It was also one that kind of got my juices flowing, so to speak. And that was what led me to becoming the Army. But growing up, I was the one that just get through school, play sports. I wasn't really into the military per se. So I didn't come from a military family.
So when 9/11 happened, you were a freshman in college, and then you didn't go directly into the military. Did you start thinking about it at that point? Were you thinking about since you were in college, becoming an officer, or what were your thoughts? How did those form?
It was actually on 9/11. I actually got on the phone and called my dad, and I said, "Dad, I think I'm going to join the Army."
Wow.
And he didn't say no. He didn't discourage me, but he paused and collectively just said, I don't think that is a good idea to act that emotionally. Give yourself some time. So finish out your first year. You're already there. Finish out your first year and then make that decision. Well, looking back on it, I think what he was thinking was, the war's not going to last that long.
Right.
So by then it's okay.
Right.
But,
right. So that was 2001, 2002, you were still in college, right? And it was 2003, yep. December of 2003, right? When you sort of like pulled the trigger. What led to that at that point in time?
It was actually before then, but I tried to get this. You've probably heard of it, the Option 40 contract, and I was not going into the Army without it. So I signed on the dotted line in early 2003.
Okay.
But they didn't ship me out till actually beginning of 2004.
Okay.
So I had to wait a whole year.
So what was so important about that contract for maybe any viewers who might be thinking about becoming an Army Ranger? Why was that contract important?
I'm like I said, I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I'm very analytical, and I like to be very strategic in the things that I do. And my thought was, at least I'm guaranteed a chance. Mm-hmm. That's written in the contract, so I can always go back to that and say, "Hey, here it is, written down." Mm-hmm. Now, we all know that that's not always the case. That even if it's in the contract, it sometimes doesn't happen. However, that was my best shot. I thought I didn't want to take any chances of not being able to get a shot at Ranger Battalion.
Right.
And youngins out there, listen to Tony. He's leading you on the right track here, because we got a lot of young people who are interested in the military and thinking of joining. And the Option 40 contract he's talking about, when you go to an Army recruiter, it guarantees you a shot, as he says, to go to basic training, then airborne school, and then now it's called the Ranger Assessment and Selection Program. So if you want to go to Ranger Battalion, that's the contract.
And it's the same thing for BUDS or for dive school or for anything else like that. There are so many guys who show up at boot camp and say, well, my recruiter said that I could ask for this. And it's like, you don't get to ask for that. We don't need that right now or whatever.
Well, you can ask. They'll probably laugh at you.
But yeah, so yeah, you were smart about it. You waited. So then tell us about like your induction. First off, how did your parents respond, and how did your brother, who had always said he was going to be a Ranger, respond?
Yeah, actually, my brother, right after I shipped off to basic training, he did the same thing.
No shit.
He had an Option 40 contract, and it was like his last week of basic training. He had a prior shoulder surgery that we thought was good, but in the last week of basic training, after they got back from their field exercise, this is horrible. They were getting a little smoke session, and he dropped down to do push-ups, and the shoulder exploded. The surgery failed, and they medically discharged him, and so he never really had a chance. He tried everything to stay in, but at that point, the military's not going to damage goods.
Yeah, for sure. So what was it like for you then, showing up, because you showed up at Benning, I assume, and started that whole process? What was that like for you?
I mean, coming from where I came from, it's a middle class, very middle America kind of town. Not a lot of crime. Everyone pretty much does what they're told. Newer buildings, newer homes. I wouldn't say people were rich, but they were living a good life. And getting to the military was a little bit of a culture shock. But I'm the type of guy that's pretty laid back. So you asked me what I want for dinner, and I want that one. I'm not a picky guy.
Yeah.
And I can kind of take things as they come. And I think that's probably what helped me get through that process, to be honest. I'm very adaptable. But I would say, it was quite the culture shock. More so, not for me, like me personally, to me, it was seeing the other people and where they came from. Uh-huh. And I mean, you see people from all walks of life, and some of them have had just awful upbringings. And that actually bothered me. I was kind of sheltered from some of that, and at least growing up.
Yeah. To see how hard other people had it.
Yeah, like at graduation, I remember at basic training, I shed a tear, actually. I probably shouldn't admit that, but I did. Looking at some of my buddies that no one was there. There was no one there to congratulate them, or because they didn't have anybody.
Right.
They had no one.
Right.
And that bothered me. I was probably the biggest moment where I actually shed a tear after basic training was because of the guys that had no one to hug. Yeah. Basically.
Yeah. And so after your AIT, your one station unit training, your then you went on to, was it still RIP at the time, or what was it called at that point in time?
Yeah, you go directly to airborne and then to RIP. Yeah.
Okay. And so what was RIP like for you?
I mean, I think it was basically like it is for everybody else. It was a month-long smoke session. However, I got the joy of being put in the pre-hold where they were backed up and we had to stay there an extra month. And yeah, it was, I mean, I got pneumonia.
That's right.
When I was there, and it was brutal. We were put in these condemned barracks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where I got pneumonia from. I was in these, I mean, they literally cut the chain on the building to let us in because they didn't have any place to put us. And yeah, I had it pretty bad. But of course, me being the person who I am, I tried to hide it from everybody. Didn't want anyone to know I was hurting. And I had a friend drive me off post on the weekend to get treated. And we drove far. I said, nowhere close. These guys are all talking. Go far. We drove about an hour out. And the doc was trying to convince me you need to tell your commanders, you might be going to the hospital soon. Thankfully, the medication he gave me worked. So I just kept chugging along in the hold before going to RIP. I was pretty healed by the time I started RIP.
So you finish RIP. And you get your dream assignment with a couple of your buddies, actually, right? Yeah, to wonderful, sunny Washington
JBLM.
State 2nd Battalion. And so you show up there, and what was your greeting like when you got to 2nd Battalion?
The greeting?
Yeah.
Oh, it was cupcakes and a party and a kegger.
Yeah.
You gonna get that?
Welcome to the team.
Yeah.
You're part of the family now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly how it went. No, it was, they were deployed. So I arrived to the newly minted Tab Spec 4s who were angry they weren't on deployment. And they had some fun.
Took it out
They
on
had
you.
no one to tell them what to do. So they just, played games. We got to, build things. We got to run around buildings carrying cots and with our buddies on it. We had fun.
So at this point in time, both Iraq and Afghanistan are going, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So when you said they were deployed, was it just your company that was deployed? Was it the whole battalion that was deployed? And how were they deploying between Afghanistan and Iraq at that time?
Yeah, so our company was in Iraq at the time. And I think what they were doing was 2 companies were in Iraq and 1 was in Afghanistan.
Okay.
But my company was in Baghdad, and they were busy. That was a busy, busy time.
Yeah.
So they came back and they were full of it.
Yeah. And that was Charlie Company, right?
Yeah, Charlie Company.
Okay. And so, what was your life at battalion back? How long did it take them to come back? What was your life there until, because your first deployment was actually to Afghanistan?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, as a private in battalion, I think everyone has pretty much the same experience. You just do what you're told, and it's better for you if you just do what you're told. But yeah, you're basically the whipping boy of a battalion.
Yeah.
And you work hard. Your whole goal is to get a deployment under your belt and get to Ranger School. That is like the path at that time.
So you said you were working hard. I think you mentioned, how many hours were you guys training and, all different things? Like, I don't even know what regiment was training in at that point in time, but you were in that was about your time.
Same time frame.
So you mentioned you were training in your book, like 14 hours a day, 12 to 14 hours a day, a lot?
Yeah. So, they go through these cycles, these training cycles where there are certain periods of time where you're training, 12 to minimum of 12 hours a day. And you do that for a couple weeks straight. And so the point I was talking about in the book was one of those really, really tight training cycles where, you're going from range to range to range. You're not getting much sleep. Sometimes you're sleeping at the range. Sometimes you come back. They're just, trying to get every type of training possible done in this really short period of time. So it was brutal. I mean, I don't remember sleeping much during those days. I remember getting back sometimes to the company area, downloading our gear, cleaning our weapons, going to sleep, waking up, and going right back to the range. And it was probably 4 or 5 hours of sleep. So we were busy.
But I mean, you're like living the dream. You're living the dream now, right? This is Ranger Battalion. I mean, it's what you were expecting, right?
I kind of had some idea that it was going to be brutal when you're a private, but yeah, I didn't know it was going to be like that.
Out of curiosity, since your company had just come back from Iraq, and then your next deployment was going to be to Afghanistan, and combat is combat, but they're also two different operating environments. Were you guys more training for the place you had been or the place you were going, or was it just kind of general all-around training?
I mean, it was a general all-around training, but we always knew where our next deployment was going to be, and we would definitely alter our training based on where we were going. Like when we knew we were going to Afghanistan, we were hitting the mountains. We were doing lots of ruck marching and getting out in the hills and learning how to walk through the woods when you're under night vision, which is a learning curve, right?
Sure.
So
yeah,
once you learn it, it's not that big a deal, but that curve is brutal. Those first 3 or 4 months when you're trying to learn your weapon and you can't see your hand in front of your face.
Yeah.
And we were using binoculars at the time, so it's a brutal process trying to learn it. I didn't always have these. I didn't always have glasses. I had great vision when I was in battalion. As soon as I got out of the military, I couldn't see a dang thing.
Yeah. You talk about how rough the training was. I mean, you guys actually had a training casualty, correct?
Yeah, it was our first few months in battalion. It was at a street mount site. So basically, we were training to how to clear a street with buildings. Really cool site on Lewis, and essentially what I've gathered is that after one of the iterations, the privates run through and put the targets back up on the walls. Well, one of the targets had fallen off of a wall, and it was placed on a hot wall. So the next time the group came through, they were shooting at a target, but it went through a wall. So, I don't know all the details behind that, but yeah, it was brutal. I mean, you don't expect it when you're training. It's dangerous, but you never really expect anyone to get hurt in training.
Yeah,
that's kind of a wake-up call for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. So you guys go through that cycle, and then your first deployment is to Afghanistan. And were you guys really busy when you first, how long were you there initially? Were you busy before this, this mission?
Yeah, it was interesting times there in Afghanistan. It was, the war has kind of shifted in 2005, and it was more of the win the hearts and minds at that point. And that's not the 75th job. So we were mostly idle. We did basically nothing for the first 2.5 to 3 months before Red Wings. We were just training every day, going out in the range and shooting and clearing buildings, and it was not what anyone expected.
What was this at Bagram?
It was a Bagram, yeah.
Okay.
But the whole country was really slow at that time. And for whatever reason, that summer was just, there wasn't much going on. And, we were pretty pissed off about it, especially us new guys. We got a deployment under our belt. It didn't do a thing, so it doesn't matter. So a lot of us were bitter because we were there for one thing and one thing only, and that was, to experience war.
Kick some ass.
Yeah.
But ironically, once you experience it, you really don't necessarily want that exact situation again. You play it out one way in your head, and it never goes that way.
Yeah.
It's always, we're going to just dominate and it's going to be done. But sometimes it's not that way. We didn't do a dang thing until Operation Red Wings hit. We were close to going home with, I called it pitching a shutout on that deployment.
So tell us then about the run up to Red Wings. Like, were you designated as a QRF for that mission? Did you even know that mission was going on? I mean, how did this come up on your radar initially?
Yeah, we actually didn't know anything about the mission. About 2 weeks prior, my squad was designated as primary combat search and recovery for the entire country of Afghanistan. Basically, they were trying to find jobs for us that were combat related, because they weren't going to send a Ranger platoon out to win hearts and minds. That's like the dumbest thing ever. Thankfully, they got that right. But yeah, that was one of our jobs, and we trained up for it. And we never really thought we would actually do anything. I think it was one of those, like, just go through the motions, learn the job. We know how to dismantle a helicopter. We know how to work with the PJs. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, right after that training, we get the call that a Chinook helicopter just went down and you guys are going to go recover it. And that's basically all we knew. We later found out it was a 160th bird, which we were all confused because it was middle of the day. And come to find out, yeah, it was the middle of the day, and that might have been one of the reasons why it ended the way it did. Obviously it was a lucky shot. I was right at the crash site, and there's not many places they could have shot from to get a good view. So whoever it was got really lucky. Now, granted, those guys have a lot of fighting skills. I don't want to discount their skills because, look at right now. They are taking over a country in weeks.
Well, luring helicopters into valley systems and shooting them down is something that the Afghans excel at, right?
Yeah, well, this was at the peak. This was at the top of the mountain, so a little bit different than their usual MO of getting them into a place where they could shoot down at them. This guy had to shoot up. There's no doubt about it. So
you guys hear about this, get spun up for this bird that went down. What's the process like then for, is it just your squad or is it the entire platoon that is designated to go in?
Yeah, our whole platoon got spun up on that one. We were getting word that this is like similar to Roberts Ridge. So obviously Roberts Ridge happened a couple years prior to that. And we knew all about it. We had learned, we had some lessons learned from that. So we thought we were going into the same thing again. So that was our mindset going into it, was this is going to be a hellacious firefight when we get there. We're putting our gear together, and Rangers being Rangers, we don't need water. We don't need food.
Right.
More ammo.
Right.
So we just loaded up on ammo and we were ready to go. We had basically no intel. We didn't know anything about the SEALs on the ground. All we knew was that there was a Chinook helicopter down. It was a 160th bird. It had some SEALs on board, and we were going to get it. And, they sent us out.
Yeah.
And with that intel, that was it.
So for the people who might not be familiar with this story, this actually all started with Luttrell, Dietz, right, Murphy, and Axelson, a four-man SEAL team recce team, SEAL recce team that went out. I believe, was it for Ahmed Shah to like find his IED factories or to do the recce on those? They got compromised by a shepherd or a goat herder or somebody. They let him go. He reported on them, and then forces converged on them, and so they called for a quick reaction force, and that's why the Chinook, the 160th Chinook, launched during the day with the SEALs on it, was as a force to save these. And then the bird gets shot down. Do they know what it was shot down by?
We didn't at the time. We had suspicions that it was a stinger, is what we initially thought. The evidence is still not 100% on it, but I think what we've come to the conclusion is it was probably an RPG-7. And, it was, if you've ever shot an RPG, they're not super accurate. So he hit the directly at the rotor mass, and it just went spinning out of control at that point.
So at this point, do you guys know anything about Luttrell and his team, or do you only know about the down Chinook? Do you know that there are other Americans out there?
Yeah, we knew there was someone out there, but we didn't know it was a SEAL team. We didn't know it was a recon team. We just knew that it was a quick reaction force going to help somebody.
Okay.
We didn't find out about the recon team until we were on the ground. At least at my level, I was a private, so I had to do a lot of interviews to kind of get all this information. But yeah, we didn't get that trickled down to us.
Yeah.
So talk to us about the infiltration then.
Yeah, that was a fun one. The initial one was the night after the bird was shot down, and the weather was just absolutely awful. It was, raining, and it was windy, and we were flying up into the mountains, and you couldn't see a thing out of the bird, not one thing. And it was struggling to get up into the mountains. So by the time we got pretty close to the mountain, we were starting to head up the mountain. They actually pulled us out. They were worried about losing another bird. So we went to Jaybad or Jalalabad, and we stayed the night, and we were going to try again the next night. And as you can imagine, a platoon full of Rangers who was told that you're going to help your buddies, but we're going to pull you because of weather. There was a little bit of anger in that bird. All of us were pissed off. Like, are you kidding me? Weather, drop us here. We'll walk in. But, commanders do what commanders do, and they were not willing to lose our bird.
I mean, at this point, you don't know if Americans survived the crash, if they're fighting off hostiles. Like, you have no idea what's going on the ground right now with this bird and the people on it. Is that correct?
No, not at all. We did get some word that there was a strobe on the crash site and that it was moving around. So, that could be a couple things. That could be someone who survived. That could be the enemy gathering gear. It could be a lot of things. So we didn't really think much of it other than, hey, we might have some people alive on the crash site. So the next night is when we actually did our actual infill. And that was something that it's tough to explain. I mean, I wrote about it and I tried to explain as best I could, but we did a 110-foot rope through some fog and trees to the point where when we were going to get on the rope and you looked down, there was no chem light. So normally you would look down and you'd see chem lights.
Right.
But it was so foggy and we were so high up, you couldn't see a thing. So I didn't even know how high we were. I got on the rope and just held on for dear life and was waiting to hit the ground.
So for
waiting.
Some of the civilians out there, this is a fast rope we're talking about, like a braided nylon rope that you can grip like a fire hose, sort of, coming off of one of the MH-47s that you can see behind Tony there on his screen. And you're saying the rope was 110 feet long, which is much longer than we usually would use. And that rope is just descending into the fog below and disappearing. You have no idea where the bottom is.
No one did. I mean, even the rope master, when he got to the rope, they go and they give us the thumbs up. He looked at us and did one of these.
Oh my God.
No one knew what that meant. We're like, what do you mean, no? And then he went. So,
wow. Balls.
Yeah.
So we all followed.
Yeah. That's amazing because, again, you don't know. You can't see it. You have no idea what's at the end of that rope. If it's a big hole, if it's a weight, I mean, you just don't know.
Or just empty space.
Yeah, exactly. The edge of a cliff where everybody's like, ah.
What was at the bottom when you got down there?
It was logged. It was a logged area, so there were a bunch of trees laying down on their sides. Because when I landed, there was nothing to put my feet on, so I just flopped over. I was laying on the ground in between trees that were downed, because the Afghans do a lot of logging up in those parts, and obviously that had recently been logged because we were tree stumps and everything else down there. But yeah, you got to remember it's foggy, and you have your night vision up,
right,
out of the way. You don't flip it down until you get to the bottom. So I couldn't see a thing. It was pitch black.
If there's timber or logs down there, I mean, was there a pile up? Because guys, obviously, if they're falling, you can't get out of the way, and guys just start stacking.
Yeah, it was like nothing. It would be like watching a circus. I mean, I'm rolling around, and I hear guys trying to get up next to me, and people trying to run to the perimeter, and obviously got senior guys like running up there and grabbing people out of the way, because we're just coming down one after the other, landing on each other. And we actually did have one. We had one guy, our radio operator, who was, came burning in, like, you can only imagine with his radio.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he was unconscious or not, but the next guy landed right on him and compound fracture to his arm.
Oh my God.
Thank God you guys didn't have a mortar team with you.
Yeah, thank God. We did have mortars out there, but I don't know if I don't think they may have had their 60, to be honest.
Oof. Can you imagine that plate coming down?
We were loaded. We were loaded down. Our Chinook was at weight with like 25 guys. And if you've ever been on a Chinook, you can get a lot more than 25 guys on one and still fly easily.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, we were at weight partly because the elevation was so high,
right?
But also because we had, we had to carry enough body bags. And I don't know if you ever carried a military body bag, but they weigh about 20 pounds. They are not light. I couldn't believe it the first time I held it. I'm like, what the heck is this, lead? But it's a really thick canvas, very large bag. I didn't know that. So it was news to me, and we had to carry these things.
Yeah, that's morbid, man. And I'm sorry you guys had to deal with all of that. Well, I'm sure we'll get into that in a little bit. But
how far was your rope position from the crash site?
I've been able to look at it on a map, and I actually laughed because it was like 2 miles, but it was 2 miles on the map.
Right.
With elevation change, it was about 6 miles, and it felt like 20.
Yeah.
Because you walk 100 meters, and you've only on the map gone 10.
Right. Because you're going up or
you're going straight up.
Yeah.
And another issue with this whole mission was the area we didn't even have proper maps. We were using satellite imagery to get to our location. And, obviously the point man is trying to make a route because they didn't tell us exactly where they were going to land. It was, we're going to get as close to this point as we can get, but we're going to put you where we find an opening or where something looks safe. And we're just going to put you down.
Right.
And they didn't put us on exactly where they said they were going to put us.
Right.
So it took us a little bit to get oriented. And thank goodness we had a good point man, because he led us directly to the crash site.
Right.
Like spot on.
Well, then I imagine that they were worried about another ambush. Yeah. It's like, hey, we were down one bird, there will be another one coming. So, they've got to put you on the Y or even, further out, a good terrain feature or two away.
So it's 2 miles straight line distance on the map. You guys start moving during the day or you could start moving at night?
Middle of the night. So it was around midnight that we hit the ground.
And your squad leader or team leader, that was the point man, was Johnny on the spot and took you right to the crash site?
Yeah, there were 2 point guys that basically worked together. One of them was Sergeant Condi of 3rd Platoon that we linked up with, and he's just known for his line nav skills. So thank you, Condi, for putting us on point. I know you're probably going to watch us at some point. So, it unbelievable that, I've learned land nav. Obviously, I went to Ranger school and I was a team leader, so I'm pretty good at land nav. But this was something else. This is a different world out there.
And how long did it take you to move those 2 miles?
You know, we hit the crash site at sunrise, so you can imagine that's a lot of
several hours. Yeah,
5 to 6 hours of walking.
Yeah. No, Afghanistan is brutal terrain. Brutal.
And carrying all that gear. I mean, the ever-present question, were you guys wearing body armor on top of all that?
We were.
Yeah.
So that was another kind of lesson learned about that is you don't bring your plates. So we had body armor, which is, we did drop our body armor the next day when after we recovered the Chinook and they came in for the recovery, we dropped our plates because we were only wearing the front plate. We weren't wearing the back one, thankfully.
So let's get into that then. You know, dawn comes, you find yourselves at the crash site. Ranger platoon arrives. What ended up happening that morning?
So the first thing was to determine, well, the PJs were the first ones exactly on the crash site, and they've kind of led the charge on the recovery. But they basically quickly came back after they saw the crash site and said, you know, there's no one alive. So this is not a rescue anymore. It's now a recovery. And that was like, you might as well have just taken a K-bar and slammed it in the sidewall of my car. Let out the air for sure. And then basically from there, it was, we need to recover everybody and find all their equipment. So we kind of staged and started that little sweep.
And you found there were 16 personnel, and you found 15 of them like fairly quickly, right?
Correct.
And then
it was I'd say within the first hour or so we had 15 of the 16 accounted for. But we were having a really tough time finding that last person.
Right. And at that point,
remember how big a Chinook is, right? You see it behind me.
Yeah.
Those are bigger than a city school bus or a city bus, right?
Yeah.
And on the ground, there wasn't much left. And there's a good photo in my book that shows a few of the guys at the remnants of Turbine 33. And the 3 guys cover the amount of bird that was left.
Yeah. So
it was definitely a sight that you just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Like, how is this a Chinook? How is this a Chinook? Unbelievable.
It looked like the whole side of the mountain was basically burned up.
Correct. Yeah, it was a huge fire, obviously. A huge forest fire had occurred. And everything was burned.
And you're not, for the people who might not be familiar with a CSAR, you're not just looking for the body in the sense that you don't know if this person is out there trying to escape and evade right now. You don't know if they've been captured. You have no, if you can't find the body, then it changes the entire equation for what the next steps are.
Yeah, we were definitely worried that someone was on the run. And so we're just like, we if he's not here, where is he? Did they capture him? Is he, E&Eing right now in the mountains? So they said, all right, guys, this is it. We don't have much more time. We got to find the 16th guy. Yeah. And it took some new eyes from the 3rd platoon of Charlie Company. And I'll be damned if within 30 minutes, one of the guys finds them in one of the burnt areas. It was actually a down tree that obviously fell after the forest fire, and he was hidden kind of under the tree.
Yeah. And I don't want to get too gruesome or anything, make the gory. But it must have been an experience for you guys, recovering these people that had been in a Chinook crash with a fire.
I mean, No, I would say you'd be surprised at how well you would perform when you know these are your buddies.
Right.
You're moving pretty fast, and you don't have time to process your emotions really.
Right.
So you're really just working. Now, after it's all done, that's a different story.
Right.
But in the moment, actually, I think we were so motivated to find these guys and get them home that it's hard to explain how you just get into this robot mode. But
right.
I think a lot of combat veterans watching understand. But for the civilians, it's one of those things that you try really hard to not show your emotions when you're on the battlefield, because you know how it affects your buddies and everyone around you. So the harder you work, the less chance you have for any emotions to come out. Right. So I think that's kind of how a lot of the spec ops guys operate. If you just keep working, there's nothing to think about.
But I mean, and also, as hard as difficult as that is, I mean, you guys did the honorable thing and recovered all 16 of those personnel and got them back home. And, I don't think you or any of the other guys out there, as hard as that is to deal with, you all did the right thing.
Yeah, and I think what made it really easy, at least for me, was, looking at these guys, and they were not much different than myself, right? Mm-hmm. They were fellow special operators right there in front of us. And what I kept telling myself was, if this was me, they'd be out doing the same damn thing.
Right.
They'd be out there helping us, getting us home to our family. So that made it easy. And plus, you think about the families back home, like they deserve their loved one to come home.
Right.
So there's a lot of motivation, to get them home.
Now, during this time, do you guys have sufficient ISR and coverage to make sure that you're not attacked while you're doing this?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been on a mission with more assets in the air. You got to remember, and a lot of people don't recognize this or know this, but this was the largest search and recovery operation since Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And I think it still to this day is. Mm-hmm. I think it was larger than extortion. So we had multiple air assets. I mean, I think we had 3 at one point. And that's unheard of. I mean, you're lucky to have one thing on station most of the time.
Right.
But having 3 different, plus we had fighters in the sky. I mean, it was intense. Yeah, you knew it was a big deal when you could pick and choose which air asset you wanted to use.
Yeah. And you guys had, I guess, the A-10s were kind of smacking dudes down as they were trying to move towards you. So they didn't even basically have a chance.
Correct. Yeah, we were actually, recovering the crash site. We had removed all of our gear, had our weapons set on the ground, because when you're, we're doing a recovery, you can't have any other extra weight on you.
Yeah.
People are heavy.
Yeah.
So we had all that stuff down, and we hear cracking of an AK and an air burst of a RPG. And we're like, oh, here we go. They're here. So all of us run over to our gear, throw it on, and get ready, getting ready to maneuver. And it was, looking back on it, it happened so fast. Within minutes, you hear the A-10s, you hear them fire their rockets.
Yeah.
And then you hear over the radio, they're gone.
Go back to work.
They're not going to be a problem. You guys are good.
Yeah. Those A-10s, when you hear that burp, that's one of the greatest sounds in the world.
Yeah, they were using not only their cannons, but they were using rockets. They were using the 275 millimeter, and those things are, the flechette rounds are, they're huge.
Yeah.
And they basically littered that side of the mountain. And I don't know why these guys were firing at us, to be honest. They were a mile away. So we probably wouldn't have seen them if they didn't start shooting from too far.
Yeah.
So you get the remains of the SEALs and the pilots recovered. What's the next step? To evac the bodies, the remains out? When do you start hearing about this other patrol that's out there, an American that's MIA? Kind of what's the next step for your platoon out there?
It was almost immediately when we finished recovery that we were told we need to investigate some transponder hits that were not, a mile away. So we quickly got our gear on and headed out on patrol. But, we didn't know exactly still at that point. We knew there were SEALs, but we didn't know that they were the recon element that was out there prior. We eventually learned that. I think the next morning we learned that on our next patrol. But this is Vietnam-style patrolling that we joke that we trained this way, during the global war on terror, and then we actually did it. And we had a Ranger School patrol base on my very first mission, on my first deployment.
Yeah.
And so when I got to Ranger School, it's actually kind of funny. When I got to Ranger School, I was like, oh, so this is why we did this.
Yeah.
But yeah, we quickly, right after recovery, we were out moving again.
So for the recovery, did a bird come in to do the recovery? How did you guys manage that?
Yeah, essentially, the first sergeant created an HLZ with a bunch of explosives, and we waited until nightfall to bring in another Chinook to exfil them that night.
And you guys are like, well, they're good. Like, you're not getting on the bird. You have a follow-on mission to go check out these transponders.
Yeah, we knew we weren't leaving because we knew that there were. We hit the transponder patrol before the exfil. Actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so it was right after we basically lined them up for exfil, and it was still daytime. It was middle of the day. So then we did our follow-on patrol shortly thereafter. And we were beat. We were beat up.
I bet.
I couldn't believe it. When they told us we're going on patrol, I was thinking to myself, I don't know about this. All of us are dehydrated. We're exhausted. We walked all night. We, recovered bodies all day.
Yeah.
And now we're going on a patrol.
Yeah.
And so you guys are fanning out through the mountains and the forests looking for transponders. You initiated movement that night?
It was actually middle of the day, right after the recovery. Okay. We headed out on this patrol, and SEAL Team 10 joined us. They linked up with us, and we patrolled together. And when I say patrol, this was not your traditional type patrol. It was like, we had two guys on the side of a goat trail, and we were booking it. Mm-hmm. We were just running, basically. Mm-hmm. There was no tactical movement here. We were asking for it, essentially. And we were told, the way we're moving, it's pretty likely we're going to get in a bad firefight. So be ready, because we're moving fast and we're moving loud, and we're not, in a proper, this is how you shouldn't move. But speed was our tool at the time, because we thought we might have guys that are alive still.
Right. You're moving to potentially rescue other Americans that are out.
Yeah. So it's crazy. We wouldn't even do this in a training environment.
Right.
This was like an old road march where you're on the side of the road,
right,
and you're just booking down, but it's a goat trail.
Yeah.
And the security was, you did the best you could. Right. But really, for me, I was trying to keep up with the guy in front of me.
Yeah.
So hey, if they start shooting at us, we'll fight.
How far did you have to move to that first transponder hit?
It was about a little over a mile, but it was like straight downhill into a valley.
Okay.
And so the movement down wasn't too bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Coming back, that's a different story.
And was the transponder still there when you arrived?
Nothing. There was nothing. We found nothing. We got to, it was just an empty space where obviously they probably made a radio transmission from that spot or near it, or a sat phone. We don't know exactly what caused this intel, but
no boot prints in the mud, no expended brass, nothing.
Nothing. We came up completely empty. Then it was obviously a huge disappointment. Mm-hmm. We just walked for nothing. We didn't find our guys. So we were told, hurry up and get back. We got to exfil these guys. Oof. And SEAL Team 10 is going to go with them. So they got to get back before the bird does. So obviously at that point, we were again basically running up the mountain at that point. And I was beat. I was carrying the litter, the Skedco, and it's not that heavy, but it is when you're going up a mountain.
Well, yeah, everything adds up. And you guys, I mean, how are you doing on water by this point in time? Because even wearing what is it, the 2-gallon or 5-gallon, the Camelbacks, I don't know how
2-3 liters.
Yeah, even wearing those,
2.5 liters. So
I would have burned through that on the first movement to the site, and then working all day recovering bodies. Do you guys have water left?
No, we were I think almost everyone was out of water. I had a little bit just to wet my mouth. And it was freaking me out because the one thing that you don't want to happen is to run out of water.
Yeah.
And I was the new private, right? I'm the young guy and I'm about to run out of water. I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to ask my team leader or the Tab Spec 4 for water now.
And you don't know that everybody else is already out too, though.
Just about everybody was out.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone had anything more than half a bottle of water.
Yeah.
Basically. So yeah, there was no water at that point. And we were booking it up that hill. Thankfully, the 160th guys, when they came in to recover the bodies, once we got up to the mountain, they restocked us for a little bit at least.
Yeah. So now it's nighttime. So you guys have been on the move and working hard, expending massive amounts of energy for almost 24 hours straight.
Correct.
So it's time to go home.
No. No. They put us back at HLZ up there, and we created a patrol base, and we pulled security for the night because they put us down for the night because they're like, we're going to kill these guys if we keep pushing them.
Yeah.
They're basically out of water. They've got to recover. But they said in the morning, we're heading out again. There's some other things we need to do, and we're going to drop some ordnance on this this village nearby, which we almost were in the night before. And this is apparently where Ahmad Shah had his ID factory, and they suspected him to be there. So they were going to drop 3 500-pound JDAMs on this mud hut.
But it's weird. I mean, it's odd to me that they're going to drop ordnance on anything when there's an American or at least, that there are possibly 4 Americans out there alive that they don't know where they are.
True.
Yes. As I was in the patrol base that night, me being the young private, I was a smart ranger. So I always had these questions, and I always had, insight. And I was asking things to my team leader. Thankfully, I had a good team leader who actually answered them and didn't just yell at me.
Right.
But I asked him, I said, isn't it weird that we're dropping bombs when we don't know where our guys are? And he just stared at me.
Yeah.
No answer. He literally just stared right through me. I want to answer you, but you don't want to hear my answer.
Right. Right.
I have an even more obnoxious question: is why send a recce out on this facility if you're just going to drop some bombs on it without a recce?
If you haven't heard from your recce team and you don't need their input,
just blow it.
Then why didn't you just blow it up anyway?
Just throwing that out there. Hey, teach their own. Right?
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. I don't know if they had intel on that building or not.
Right. No.
Now, RRD was on the ground, so
okay.
They may very well have had eyes on, but we didn't get that information. So I don't want to assume everything, but that was just my thoughts
at the moment. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I did not know that ROD was on the ground, so maybe they had confirmed.
So they were out in another location. What were those dudes up to?
I don't know. We did link up with them that day. So that night we did link up with them. So I don't know when they arrived or where they came from. They didn't come in with us. Mm-hmm. They just appeared. I mean, Recce doing what Recce does, or RRD does what RRD does, right? They just appear. So I wish I could get a hold of some of those guys and find out where they came from. But they were definitely on the ground for sure.
So now we're getting into day 3.
Yeah, this was 3 days post crash.
Mm-hmm.
But
And
day two of us on the ground.
2 days of you on the ground. The second morning, how much water did the Chinooks bring you? Did the recovery team bring you? Did they restock you guys?
They had like 3 or 4 cases of water, like the Costco size, basically. And we burned through it right away.
Oh,
like
sure.
It didn't last very long. We each grabbed a couple bottles, and that's what we had. I drank one during the night. I should have had another, looking back on it, but we all had a couple bottles of water for the next day.
Now, when you say bottle of water, you're just talking about like the little 12 ounce
plastic bottle of water.
the 12 ounce polar, not like like the remember the
in Iraq, the huge ones.
Or not even the bottle, but like a like the fuel can full of water.
No, just the little plastic bottles of water.
Boy, you gotta love Army supply sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I have one of my photos in the book is actually shows, you can see the trash on the HLZ because we just piled it all up.
Yeah.
You can see the water bottle sitting there.
Yeah. What are the temperatures like at this time, of year, like at night and during the day?
Hellacious. I mean, during the day it's triple digits, and at night it gets into the 60s. So, it doesn't sound cold. But I'll tell you what, when you've been sweating all day and it gets down to 60, it feels like 20.
Feels like it's freezing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was shivering. I was my teeth were chattering in the morning.
Had you guys, with your lack of water and the temperature in the day and the work and the move, had you guys had any heat casualties at this point in time?
Surprisingly, no one had a heat casualty at that time, but we did have guys that were near their dropping point shortly thereafter.
Sure.
So we're getting in it. So that next morning, what was the next orders that you guys got over the net? What came next for the patrol?
The next was we are dropping ordnance, and basically you're going to chase the ordnance. So what they did is we heard the ordnance drop, we felt it hit because it wasn't that far away, and I mean, it shook that whole mountain.
Yeah.
3 500-pound bombs. It's a lot more than I expected. I mean, we were about probably a mile to a mile and a half away, and you could feel it under your feet.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as they hit, we were out chasing them because our job now at that point was we need to confirm we got our guy.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, we still didn't know where our SEALs were. We had no clue. We didn't even know where we were going to go next. They were just sending out patrols in different directions, just trying to sweep the mountain as much as they could.
Yeah, what the hell are you going to confirm of the guy after you drop 3 500-pounders on him?
You need to ask. You need to ask the commanders above our level. I mean, even our commander, when we got there, he said, "So what do you want us to do?"
Yeah.
This was a building, and now it's a field full of cement and grass and dirt. And they said, lo and behold, I need you guys to SSE that site.
So SSE means sensitive site exploitation, and it means like if you go into a house, you search everything in the house, you take all the documents, you take the computer, like you search everything. And basically, they want you to do this to a
pile of rubble.
A pile of rubble.
I mean, to be honest, it didn't even look like a pile of rubble. It looked like, to me, it was like a farm field with some chunks of like rock and cement and dirt and clay.
Right.
It didn't seem like a building at all.
Right.
So,
now, were they doing this to target Ahmed Shah? Did they expect you? I mean, did they send you in with a handy rapid DNA like sniffer that could pull all the DNA odor from the? No.
We had nothing of the sorts.
No.
I think they wanted us to find a body, which really 3 500-pound bombs.
Right.
Come on.
Right.
But before we even got to that, that patrol down to that location it was downhill, but it was some of the most hellacious terrain we saw the whole time.
Yeah.
We were sliding on our rear ends down this mountain, you know, and it was wide open. I mean, we're sliding on our butts on a hillside. Basically, if someone had a RPK, they could have picked off a Ranger platoon. I mean, easily.
Yeah.
So to get down to that site, you know, we're basically running, sliding on our butts, and then we get there and we find this complete mess of a JDAM site that our commander, who is now General Work, he basically said, "Are you sending us heavy equipment?" Because that's what it's going to take.
Right.
We don't even have gloves. Like, we don't have gloves to do this. We have shooting gloves.
Right. Right. So what did your SSE consist of while you were there?
That is pretty awesome. Yeah, I was. You see anything? No, you don't? Okay. Really, there was no SSE. It wasn't possible. There was nothing to SSE.
Right.
You know, we started moving rocks around, and it was a complete waste of time. But we did find actually a hand. There was a hand, and one of my team leaders of my squad was poking at it with a stick. Come look at this, guys! Look at what we got. Pretty horrific to see a hand, especially when you get up to it and you look down, and the hand looks awfully small. You know, it was, I would say, best case scenario was a teenager.
Yeah. Or a little person. Maybe it was a little person. You know, the infamous midget bomb maker.
It's possible.
Yeah.
So that was a little disheartening. You know, you don't go to war to see potential civilian casualties. That's not what you want.
Right.
No one wants that.
Right.
So that was my first thought, actually, is like, oh man, we killed some civilians. This is horrible. So we were all sitting around thinking, we just killed civilians. Great.
Right.
That's freaking awesome. But years later, I found out from my platoon leader, who actually went back to the same village as a company commander. Actually, he left Red Wings and became company commander for the company that was in the documentary Restrepo.
Oh, okay.
So if you watch that was his next deployment. Pretty unbelievable. And he found out that actually that JDAM actually killed a bunch of insurgents. So it wasn't a civilian casualty like I thought.
Right.
So that was a little bit refreshing, but you know, I lived like 10 years of my life thinking that I saw a bunch of civilians get killed.
Right. And I mean, up to this point, like, you guys haven't been in combat, so you haven't had that, I don't want to say release, but sort of that active part. You've recovered bodies, which was probably, or had some emotional, you know, weight. And then you go and you think, you know, you feel as though we just JDAM'd civilians, which has emotional weight. And I mean, does this feel like a heavy op for you, especially since you haven't been in combat yet?
Yeah, for me, it was like, I honestly, this was the moment, you know, Jack was mentioning earlier, you were living the dream, right? This is what you thought it would be? No. Well, that's the moment I had. It was basically right after that night, after that JDAM site. I was sitting there and, you know, talking to one of the team leaders, and basically it was like, is this what you thought war was going to be like? No.
Yeah,
this is nothing. This is nothing that I thought it was going to be like.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, the whole mission was a complete failure, right? Like, we wouldn't even know about this mission if it was a success.
Right.
So the whole point the only reason we're talking about this is because it was like one of the most epic failures in Spec Ops history. So, you know, we're sitting there on the mountain, and I'm just thinking, okay, so we know 16 guys are dead. Mm-hmm. We killed some civilians. We still haven't found our Navy SEALs. Mm-hmm. And I haven't eaten, and we're out of water. This fucking sucks.
Yeah.
You know, this is horrible.
Yeah. And so now,
where's the fighting? Where's the glory?
Right.
And now it's time, of course, for you guys to get on the bird and go home for hot sandwiches and soup, right?
Ice cream.
You know, I wish, at that point we were starting to have heat casualties. People were starting to fall out, and docs running around with IVs, and it was a mess. And I'm sitting there joking with one of the guys who's about to be a heat casualty. I asked him, wouldn't it be nice if they airdropped some pizza? And he didn't like that, because he was about to come to find out he was about to pass out.
Yeah.
So, we finally got a resupply that night, but that was another shit show. Was they went to go airdrop us water and food, and they dropped it a valley over.
Oh my gosh.
Oh shit.
And we're like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Like, we've walked for 24 hours. Like, we're not going to get it.
Yeah.
And the one that landed near us, the chute never opened and it burned in. So half of the stuff had exploded.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm drinking out of these like broken water bottles that were half full, and we're just chugging these things. And they resupplied us the next day. Finally, we ended up getting food and water. But it was on the way down to that JDAM site that we heard that there was new intel. That's when we kind of heard about the SEALs. Mm-hmm. So 3 Charlie was on our way down, was sent to a village to search for what we heard was an American. They had an American. They were kind of chattering on the radio, and someone had come into a local base and said, we have an American in our village. So 3 Charlie basically started running to that village while we were on our way down to that JDAM. That was the only glimmer of hope I think we had for the first 2 or 3 days there. Mm-hmm. But we also heard shortly after the SSE that they found somebody. Mm-hmm. They literally found a live American. And I can't even explain what that felt like. Wow. After all that negativity and all that failure that we all felt, it's like, holy shit, someone survived all this. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was like we were like partying.
And you guys got
him. High-fiving.
Wow. Yeah. And not only did they survive, but you guys being out there, having gone through all that, you guys were on, close enough to actually go and get him.
Yeah. He was not that far. I mean, far considering all the injuries and stuff that he went through.
Sure.
Like, I can't believe he made it that far, to be honest. But I guess, adrenaline does crazy things to the human body.
Sure. Tony, one second. I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to pick up right back at that thought. I just got to take a 60-second break here to tell our viewers about one of our sponsors today, and we'll pick right back up with this story. I want to tell you guys about BlueBird Botanicals. They are one of the oldest CBD companies in the industry, founded in 2012. They made a name for themselves through quality and transparency. They're the first company to make third-party lab tests for all CBD products publicly accessible on their website. They meet every quality standard in the book, following all federal guidelines and dietary supplement companies and pushing for stricter regulation for hemp companies. They make a couple different products. There's a cooling pain relief cream that is formulated to provide relief from minor aches and pains in muscles and joints. They also make a United We Chill broad spectrum CBD. This is their broad spectrum CBD line. Includes cannabinoids from hemp, but with less than 0.01% THC. Broad spectrum extracts and CBD isolates are best for those looking to avoid THC completely. Couple different flavors. It comes in strawberry, margarita, lemon, drop, and watermelon. Made with sugar-free sweeteners and natural flavors. What's that website, D? BlueBirdBotanicals.com. And you folks probably see it on screen.
Yeah, I've been using that cream. I like that cream quite a bit.
Team 50 for 50% off.
Team 50 is the discount code you can use to get 50% off your order. So go give them a look. Help support the show. We appreciate it. So let's pick up right back.
Actually, can I say something really quick?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Yeah.
About BlueBird, actually. So you guys know I'm a chiropractor, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I actually recommend that product to a lot of patients.
Oh, really?
And I've actually seen it in a therapeutic sense.
That's
works
cool.
Amazing. So try it. It's great.
No, that's fantastic.
I recommend it.
Yeah, I like the drops a lot. But what I'm hooked on their cream, the cream with the menthol and the full spectrum CBD.
Very
for
good.
like arthritis and stuff. Yeah, I like that a lot. Let's actually get to some questions.
Okay, before we talk about the recovery.
We just want to get to some questions, and then we'll get back into this. Okay, Jackson, thank you very much. For Tony, Jack, and Dave, where do you all see the future of Ranger Regiment headed in a perfect world? What would be the next evolution of the 75th?
Tony, take it away.
I mean, I think they've kind of already molded into this counterterrorism type force that is new to them. They went from, airfield seizures to these direct action raids, and I think that's the right path, given there's so many urban centers in the world. If we're going to war again, we're going to need that large urban force to go door to door and fight. I mean, it's urban warfare is the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the Ranger Regiment, they build themselves, they call themselves America's premier raid force. So that kind of says it all right there, what they see their future as. So that's definitely not going away.
I mean, I was there, so I can't speak to it so much now, but I was there when it was, airfield seizures, when it was patrol base, and when it was making the change into the CQB and things like that. And there were a lot of people at Ranger Battalion that resisted that. They didn't want them to go that way. So we were, kind of serving two masters. One, you get in your RSOV, your Ranger, whatever it was, vehicle, and go out and sit in a bear suit on a cold ass airfield in the morning after, whatever. And then, and then you'd go do, up drills and, Mozambiques and stuff, on the range or the shoot house. When I worked with Rangers or, in Afghanistan, Iraq, they'd become so professionalized where they could become dog handlers. They could become, the interrogate. I mean, they just had a lot more going on, which I think is fantastic.
And now it's like a little army within an army.
Yeah. No, I think that's fantastic. But you guys obviously know a lot more than I do about that. And then Jackson, again, what was the most professional unit you worked with? Rangers seem to always talk highly of Delta, Air Force Special Operations Command, and HRT. Did you work with any of them?
Yeah, I personally worked with all of them. I mean, I worked with SEAL Team 6, HRT. I worked with
the AFSOC guys, the PJs, the AFSOC guys.
PJs, obviously, yeah. And I would say the two that stood out to me the most, one being Delta, far and away, I think the best counterterrorism force out there. And the other one is the PJs. Those guys, you talk about knowing your job inside and out. Those guys were amazing. So I give a lot of props to those guys.
Jackson, thank you again. How critical were other soft elements of the SEAL? Oh, how critical, as in like critical, were the other soft elements of the SEALs' plans for the Rookie of Ahmed Shah? All due respect, was there pushback on their planning ability?
I don't know the full details of that. I think this has been written about. I think Ed Derrick covered this in his book. And it's, I think a lot of the soft community actually didn't want to do this mission. And the only people that actually accepted it was the SEALs. So I think that was the pushback was, no, this doesn't seem like a good idea for our guys. So all it takes is one commander to say yes, right?
Right. I think there were some people that told the SEALs that it wasn't a good idea, but that's one opinion, and the SEALs had their opinion. So,
yeah, I think the Marine commanders in particular advised that they should have more Marines on the ground nearby when they're doing this recce mission because of the terrain.
Yeah,
and I think they said no, we're going by ourselves.
Yeah. Alejandro, thank you, buddy. Hey, Tony, was talking to a mutual Ranger buddy of ours. He wanted me to ask you to tell stories of bush diving and BAC and RIP. Ha ha ha. Two.
Oh, that's I think I know who asked that question. Felipe, I know that's you. So it's essentially, we used to get a little rowdy on the weekends, and I fell into a bush on a walk back to a motel, and you tripped over your own feet because you had one too many.
Right.
And the bush was the softest bush I'd ever fell into. So every time we would go back to this motel on the weekend, we would jump into it. And so we called it bush diving. Rangers being Rangers.
Yeah, exactly. Dickie's Discord's dailies. Thank you. Oh, I didn't get a notification. My malfunction. Yeah, sorry about that.
Hit the little bell icon and select all notifications.
Yeah.
Pro tip.
And Alejandro, thanks again, buddy, for Afghan portion. What was talking with Philippe? P. He mentioned during the insertion, almost fast roping off the side of a cliff. LOL. He mentioned you had a guy land on you while roping in, injured your arm, and Charlie might.
Yeah, so I wasn't the one who was injured, but it was a bunch of trees on the ground, and we were very close to a cliff. Thankfully, not super close, but close enough. And Bert was the guy. Specialist Bert, a radio operator, broke his arm.
John Dugan, thank you very much. No segue for ball trimmers. Awkward.
Next time, we'll get you.
We got you.
Next time.
We got you. Don't worry about it. And then BPA Izzy, thank you very much for the donation. I don't see a question, and if one comes up.
let's talk about the recovery then. You guys on the ground had gotten word that an American has been found. What was the next step for your platoon?
After they found Marcus, and that was 3 Charlie that found Marcus. But basically the next job was, where's the rest of your team? We know there's 4 of you, so where's the rest of your team? And Marcus did his best, and he basically gave us a decent area to go search, and it took quite a bit of time to find the rest of his team. So our job then was, we need to get the rest of these guys, but he quickly told us that they're dead. So he knew that there was no rescue. It was recovery.
So Marcus told 3 Charlie an area to search. That got radioed over to your platoon, and then you went and searched the area, if I'm understanding right?
No, it was really close to where 3 Charlie was, and they actually searched it.
Okay, gotcha.
But we were still doing presence patrols, hoping to draw out Ahmad Shah and his boys in case they were still around.
Right.
So that's what we were basically doing at that point.
So one of the things I noticed in your book was that Luttrell was very concerned about how many guys 3 Charlie had with them, because they had been under siege, and he felt like that he was worried that you guys were going to be outgunned, right?
Yeah, I mean, the element that he came in contact with was pretty small, that he saw. Now, there were more guys, but they were kind of hidden around the village. So his concern was, they've got a lot more guys than we do.
Right.
You better have more. Like, he never really said that. He just kept asking, how many guys do you have?
Yeah.
How many guys do you have? And Lieutenant English, who was the guy who was basically interviewing him, former enlisted guy in CAG, and a Green Beret, just an amazing guy. He suspected, is what he told me. So I just want to say that, Lieutenant English has since passed from cancer. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
This was interviews. What a great, amazing human. So I just want to say that I interviewed him shortly before he died, years ago. And this was before I decided I was actually going to write a book. And he basically said he suspected that the handlers that were with Marcus were waiting to know exactly how many men they had, waiting for English to say something so that he could, tell his buddies.
Gotcha.
So English never told him how many guys they had. He just kept saying enough. We have enough. So, we were still skeptical that, these villagers were protecting him, right?
Right.
I think rightfully so.
Yeah. Interesting. So what happened? So what happened in terms of the gears turning above you when 3 Charlie calls back to command, like jackpot, like we have one? I mean, was the whole world moving for you at that point in terms of military logistics and everything you needed?
Oh yeah, I mean it was. Yeah, we had resupplies at that point. We had other units moving towards us. We had a Marine unit that was moving to us on foot. So reinforcements are on the way. And then the next part of the mission was, okay, we got to find the rest of this team. And it was, we knew they weren't alive. So it slowed down dramatically at that point. It was like to a crawl. There's no more running around. Now we're doing legit like patrols where we're drawn to contact. We're try to make contact and assault the enemy. And of course they were long gone because they're smarter than that. I mean, look what's happening.
Right.
Look what's happening right now. As soon as we left, what happened?
Yeah. Now at that time, are you guys out there in basically a company size element? In various...
we were in a platoon minus element at my location.
Well, I
mean, we were split up.
Okay, that's what I mean. Is like with English, with everybody. If you would have consolidated, about how many people did you have at that point?
There was about a company of Rangers out there. I mean, there were 2 platoons from Charlie Company, 1 platoon from Bravo Company, and of course all the other elements that were out there. PJs. You had elements of SEAL Team 10. You had RRD. We had Green Berets. We had Marines that were also in the area. So I would say total probably 2 full companies of people on the ground.
You guys could definitely lay some hate then if you needed to. Like you weren't at risk of it becoming another like fighting retreat from or E&Es from something.
I mean, it sounds that way, but we were so spread out. We're a few miles apart. So in that terrain, you have to be together in order to be effective.
Right.
We were so spread out. We were, we were ready. We were pretty exposed, I would say, each element.
So what happens next? So they call jackpot, or they have Luttrell. They find the guys. Do they? Now is it time to go home? Now do you get to go home for some cake and ice cream?
Not quite. This was the point where we still need to find his team, right? So 3 Charlie has an idea of where they are, but they weren't. I mean, Luttrell's description was not like this is the coordinates. It was like this here. They're there. He like circled an area on the map, and we trusted him, so we sent 3 Charlie there. But 1 Charlie, my unit, did patrols in other areas that we knew that they had passed by, just to be sure that, he'd just been through severe trauma. So you can trust him, but you can only trust him so much.
Right.
I mean, we don't know how bad he's hurt at that point. So we just kept patrolling and looking and crawling around in the mountains at known areas of where they had been. And it was a few days later before we found his buddies. So you can imagine that terrain's that bad. I mean, it takes days to search a little area on the map. So the whole time I was out there, I just had no appetite. I mean, I was like snacking on things, but I never ate a full meal really.
Yeah.
You're a little bit on edge from the days prior. So you weren't very hungry. So, I mean, I lost like 15 pounds in that week.
So just out of curiosity, you went to Ranger School. Like when you went to Ranger School after this, you're probably like, this isn't shit. Like I get 2 to 3 hours a night sleep. I get at least a meal or 2 a day. Like I'm cool with this.
No, Ranger School still sucks, but I would say that it was still awful. But at the same time, I always had that to fall back on, right?
Right.
In the mountain, I was in the mountains in winter. It sucked. And I just kept thinking, well, at least I'm not in Afghanistan.
Right.
So,
Right.
At least I know I'm getting a meal today.
So how long does it take for 3 Charlie to recover the other 3 SEALs?
It was a total of 2 days after Marcus
Okay.
to get everybody, and they're still Matthew Axelson was still not recovered at that point. It wasn't until we got reinforcements from 3rd Ranger Battalion, who basically deployed early because of this mission. As soon as this mission went down, 3rd Ranger Battalion was activated.
I remember when that happened.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was Charlie Company, I believe. It was like a platoon or 2 from Charlie Company that got deployed. They did.
Yeah, they got out there. I believe it was the 6th day, or 5th or 6th.
Yeah, it was like an RF1 recall.
Yeah.
They called everyone's cell phones, got them in there, and rapidly deployed those guys.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was the largest rescue and recovery operation since Vietnam. So I think the military treated this as, we are not having another Roberts Ridge. This is already bad. We're not going to get overwhelmed by firepower. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's amazing. So how were you guys doing? Were people just pretty much sticking their arrows? How are you doing battle space deconfliction at this point in time with so many moving elements that did not normally work with each other?
I don't know how to answer that because I don't know that it was that. I mean, it was tough. Obviously, there were so many moving parts.
Yeah.
And radio transmissions out there were just god awful. I mean, half of the time nothing would go through.
Right.
You'd have to try satellite, that wouldn't go through. So it was line of sight.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, it was tough. The commanders had their work cut out for them for sure.
Were there any blue on blue incidents during that point in time? Or
surprisingly, no. I mean, we linked up with units on a patrol. Like, we linked up with RD in the middle of a patrol, and so I don't know how it all occurred, but it was very well done by at least my leaders that I saw. I mean, I had some of the best guys on the planet. I had, Lieutenant Colonel Howell. I had General Work, and Congdon, who is, I believe he retired as a sergeant major. These guys were cream of the crop. So, impressive. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So how did this operation finally start winding down? I mean, after you're out there 5 days, everyone's recovered. What was the next step?
Axelson still wasn't recovered, but when 3rd Ranger Battalion arrived, they wanted to get us out of there. We were just like a battered bunch of kids out there. I mean, I have a picture. I think I sent it to you, but it was a picture right after the mission, and we looked like we had a couple pigs that rolled around in the mud. We all had beards. That's how it wound down. It's like, we got to get these guys out of here and get them replaced because they're beat to all hell.
Yeah. That's amazing.
And so what did 375 do when they hit the ground?
They immediately went after the area where they believed Axelson to be.
Gotcha.
And, Axelson, this is not like, isn't common knowledge, but he was not near his 2 buddies. He was a little bit away from them. So, one can say that, he may have survived much longer than we thought.
Uh-huh.
He may have been eating himself. So that's why it took so long. He's a stud, right? So he may have made his way out of there.
What was the estimated size of the force that they encountered?
There's so many conflicting reports out there, but I have seen videos of the Taliban has put out, or Ahmad Shah's guys have put out, and to my best estimation, I think it was no more than about 12 men. But you got to keep in mind, and this is I'm not trying to like make Marcus' story not true, because that terrain,
Right.
he could have put 5 guys against those 4 SEALs, and the superiority of position they had,
Right.
it wouldn't have mattered. It
Right.
wouldn't have mattered if there were 50 or 5.
Right.
You're shooting down on these guys, and just walking that terrain, I'll just say this: I don't know how anyone could have survived if they're ambushed from above. I just there's no cover. I mean, there's trees, but they're shooting plunging fire down on you.
Right.
Like, you don't even have to aim. So our estimation is about 12.
Yeah.
So, and at this time, as you said, that they are starting to pull your platoon out as 375 Charlie Company guys are kind of rotating in.
Correct. And we slowly, like, one platoon minus element after another, were swapping out. And we were one of the last of the elements to leave, because we had the company commander in our group. So he wanted to be the last off the mountain.
I mean, it's a wild story. I mean, what are some of your I guess, like, concluding thoughts about this rescue and recovery effort as, you know, you kind of got on the bird and returned back to base?
You know, I think one of the things that really stuck with me was what a group of men with a common mission can accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everything was against us. There was not one thing that was working in our favor. And, you know, you put me on the ground by myself and I would have quit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no doubt in my mind that, like, that terrain, I remember walking into that crash site thinking you're never going to get there, because, you know, I'm crawling up this mountain on all fours, and the rocks are sliding out under me. So I'd climb a couple feet and I'd slide down like 10, climb a couple more feet, slide down another 10. And I did this for, like, it seemed like hours, but it was probably 15 minutes worth. And the only thing that kept me going was seeing the guys around me just keep going. Mm-hmm. Everyone kept going. And, you know, we're going to find these guys, and we're going to bring them home. So I think ultimately the underlying theme is just, like, teamwork. Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable. I think right now in America, if we can get more people that have a common goal, we wouldn't have all this squabbling and BS going on.
Right.
You know, stuff would just get done.
Yeah.
You know?
You know, you bring up a really interesting point, because I think a lot of times, like, the military, particularly men in, you know, combat arms, I don't want to say they're criticized, but there's this, like, oh, well, you know, you're supposed to act like a badass. You know, there's sort of this denigration of the whole, you know, chest thumping type of thing.
Toxic masculinity.
Yeah. But, like, what you're kind of explaining is guys aren't really just doing that for themselves. We all do it so that we all suck it up. And every individual who might quit at that moment looks to their buddy who's like, it's no fucking problem. Like, we got this. Like, we're studs. It gives that sort of psychological, you know, tick to keep moving.
You know, I was thinking about this today as well for some reason, that, like, men can be very competitive with one another, sometimes to the point of stupidity, but also very supportive of one another. You know, like, that's my boy, you know, this dude, he's got this, you know, no problem. And, like, Ranger Battalion, especially in combat, and when I think back to those days, you know, even the guy that I did not like personally, and I'm like, man, I hate this fucking guy, but in combat, you're on a mission, dude, that guy will run through gunfire to come and get you if need be. You know,
you got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't get that in other places in the world, right? You got guys that you don't have to get along. You don't have to like them.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you're both coming home.
Right.
Like, that's ultimately what matters is, you know, the end of the day, you're both coming home. That's all that matters.
Right. Yeah. And we've had people on the set before, and I mean, I've said this, like, you know, because sometimes people ask veterans who have been in Afghanistan or Iraq, is like, well, did you really feel like you were doing it for God and country? You know, did you feel like this was furthering U.S. interest or U.S. safety? And it's sort of like, at that point in time, you're doing it for the person on your left and the person on your right. That's who you're doing it for. Nothing else matters.
Yeah, you mentioned doing it for country, and yeah, when you're out there, I literally didn't think about that one time.
Yeah.
All I thought about was the Americans, the people that I was going to rescue and recover.
Right.
And the only time I thought about country was just a very, very cool moment was on the 4th of July. We were still on the mountain, and the Air Force did a show of force on one of the mountainsides right in front of us. And you talk about a 4th of July fireworks show.
Oh, that's
I
amazing.
pulled down my nods and watched it.
Yeah.
It was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. So, for me, like, that was that moment where you're like, America, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, for the rest of the time, it didn't matter.
Right.
It didn't at all.
Yeah.
No, man, that's such an awesome Ranger story, and amongst all this carnage and horrible things to talk about, just being around a group of Rangers like that they're not going to give up. They're going all the way, and to be a part of that, it brings back awesome memories.
Yeah, I mean, in the process of writing this book has been, obviously, Jack, this because writing a book it's a long process and it's a lot of work. And then when you actually publish it, it's pretty exciting. But the thing that's even better is when your buddies call you and you get to reconnect with those guys. And especially the guys on this mission, they're all like reaching out to me like, thank you for finally telling our story. Thank you for finally setting the record straight that it was actually Rangers who did this, because most people don't even recognize that it was Rangers. I know it's out there, but it's not common knowledge, and most people are actually really shocked.
Yeah, I mean, there's a story floating around that it was actually an ODA that recovered Luttrell.
They were there with him. They were there with English, but English was
okay. So they're joint.
Yes, and so they were there, absolutely there. Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
And didn't Luttrell say something that, like, I'm never going to hear the end about getting rescued by you guys?
Yeah, he definitely kept his humor in the moment. That he looked at the Ranger platoon leader English and said, "Oh man, I'm never going to hear the end of this one."
Yeah, yeah.
Which is really cool, because that kind of gave us, I think, a lot of people just knowing that, hey, he's okay.
Yeah.
If he can joke about that,
right.
He's all right.
Yeah.
I think, Dave, maybe for the bonus segment, it would be good to talk to Tony about Ramadi.
Okay.
And get into that. But Tony, tell us about, a little bit about why you decided to write this book. I mean, I think you mentioned that, the story had never really been told before, but you got out of Ranger Battalion. You're a chiropractor now. I mean, what inspired you to really sit down and go through this process of writing this account and doing these interviews with all of your former teammates?
Over the years, I kind of just done it for my own reasons, like mental health reasons. And, I thought I needed to write it down. So I kind of interviewed people over the years. And I knew I wanted to write eventually. I didn't know if I want to write a book, but I wanted to write it down. And it wasn't until I looked at, I have 2 young kids. I have a 7-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl. And I looked at them, and they're playing around, and I just kept having that thought of, am I ever going to be able to tell them about my service?
Mm-hmm.
Like, am I really ever going to be able to sit down and explain this to them? And I came to the conclusion that, no, I'm probably never going to have that conversation. This one time I was on this mountain, no, not going to happen. So that was ultimately the kicker was, I need to put this on paper so that my kids can know a little bit more about their dad.
Now,
I don't know how much longer I'm going to be here. Like, I could get hit by a train tomorrow.
Right.
So that was my huge motivating factor. Telling the story was a huge part of it. And then encouraging other veterans to kind of tell their stories. I found that, like, a lot of the war stories we read about, they're like these, like, glorious battles, right? These amazing things that happened with these guys. And that's great. I love those stories. But there's a lot of stories that just never will be told because they weren't made into a movie, or they weren't glorious.
Yeah.
But they're important for history.
Right.
They're important for, our force moving forward, knowing that this is what it was like during this time. We see it with World War II. We see it with Vietnam. There's all these stories. My favorite book of all time is a fiction book, is actually The Things They Carried.
Oh yeah.
But you know what? It told an amazing story about Vietnam. And I think it was mostly true, with a little bit of extras, right? So, there's a lot of good reasons to write a book, and I think I'm hoping that a lot of veterans start doing that. I want to see more.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Me too. And I think about about the lieutenant you mentioned, England, who guy unfortunately passes away of cancer. Once these guys are gone, that's it. They don't have that opportunity to tell the story. And thank God that you interviewed him and were able to give him a bit of a voice in your book. But I would just add that to all the guys out there, our generation, Tony, of guys that, they should tell their story for their kids and for the other soldiers out there, the people who are thinking about joining the military and the veterans and for history.
Yeah, no, I think it's huge. Like, obviously, Lieutenant English, his story obviously would have never been told, right? So he's a stud, and the only people who know that are the ones that served with him.
Right.
Well, now I can say a lot of people are going to know about Lieutenant English and how cool he was.
That's awesome.
I know that makes me feel pretty good about it.
Yeah. No, it is important. I think, one of the, Jack and I love having people on the show and hearing their stories. And part of our motivation about this whole show is to capture history on the personal level, on the ground level, and not, not the Nat Geo special and not the documentary and, not the news reports, but full stories, not sound bites from the people who lived it.
Yeah, I mean, you don't hear about the I ran out of water and ran out of food story, right?
Right. But both of us know what that's like, and how torturous that can be, especially in Afghanistan, that terrain. Anybody who has pumped over that terrain, it's brutal. It's brutal, and you'll go through a camelback like that. So I just can't imagine what you guys, and working all day.
In hindsight, I would have carried a lot less ammo because, there was no fighting,
right?
And it would have been a lot more water,
right? Yeah. Out of curiosity, when you said that, when you were asking yourself, would I talk to my kids about this or would I tell them about it? Is that you would not sit down and say, this is what I did? Or is it that if they asked you questions that you wouldn't answer them? Do you have a reluctance to talk to your kids, or do you just feel like you don't want to introduce the topic?
No, I think it's just I wouldn't go into as much detail as I was able to go into.
Yeah.
Like all the details you can write down versus, I'm not going to tell them what it's like to recover a human body.
Right.
I'm not going to go into that detail.
Right.
But in a book, I can do that.
Right.
And it brings a lot of perspective to that whole story.
Right.
But it's an interesting thought because there's plenty of people out there with amazing stories, and they'll tell parts of it.
Yeah.
But this is a way to tell the whole story, right?
Yeah. I have the same problem, Tony. I have a daughter, and she asks me questions about the Army. She knows I was in the Army and jumping out of airplanes and this sort of stuff, but I really struggle with how to share that with her and what to tell her about that. She's young enough that I kind of keep it fairly vanilla, and maybe if she's still interested when she's older, I'll tell her some of the more, some real shit. But it is. It's as a parent, I find it difficult to engage with my own kid on that kind of level.
Yeah, you're not going to go into details, right? So I think, you can hand them a book, right? When they're old enough.
Well, I'm also very hesitant to make her think that it's cool and make it sound really cool. You need to go because now women can join the Army and become Rangers and do all this other which still I'm having heart palpitations about, especially when I think of my daughter. But I'm hesitant to make it sound too cool that she's going to think this is something I should go do, So I pull the brakes though.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I put some of the stuff I put in my book. I go into things that suck.
Yeah.
It's not all glorious, right? You're not going in for the video game battle, right? This is war. Like this is real war. And so that was a huge motivator. Not to discourage them, but to give them the full story.
Right,
They actually make an educated decision.
Right.
An informed decision, yeah. Let's get a couple other questions. Andrew, thank you he retracted it, but thank you. Andrew, thank you again. Another retracted. BPA, is he retracted? Thank you. BPA, is he, what's the difference between an 82nd Airborne and 75th Ranger airfield seizure, asking for a friend?
I have no idea. I've never been in the 82nd. So I would say that the Ranger Regiment, I don't even know if they do them anymore, to be honest. But when we did them, we were kind of transitioning away from them. So we were focused more on the urban combat. But this was at the time, it was still technically one of our specialties. So I think right now the answer probably is the 82nd is responsible for airfield seizures, is my guess.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% up to date. I think they call it like strategic forced entry operations or some shit like that now. I believe they still train for them, but the 82nd, the immediate reaction force, the IRF, which under that there's the IRB. But anyway, long story short, as like an immediate reaction force, the 82nd has kind of made leaps and bounds. They responded to the Iranians attacking the embassy in Baghdad last year. They responded to the riots in Washington, D.C., didn't get past the National Capital Region, thankfully. And then they just got spun up to go stand by for Afghanistan yesterday. So, like 82nd has come a long way as well. So, I mean, I'm not gonna throw shade on those guys. They're staying busy.
Yeah, I think you're basically, what it sounds like is they're transitioning into what Ranger Battalion was. Kind of when we were in Jack.
Right.
Obviously it's all evolved since then, but it sounds very similar to what we did.
So for the people who might not be aware, when we talk about airfield seizure, the Rangers used to be sort of the premier shock troops, I guess, or what, where if we were going to make entry into a country, the Rangers would do a low altitude parachute, jump onto it and seize the airfield so that the military could bring in their aircraft.
It's like a beachhead.
Yeah, it's like a beachhead that the Marines would do, only for airfield. Jerry J, thank you. That's why I do recommend for a new guy, try rock climbing if you want to go to Special Forces. I was fine in Afghanistan.
Okay, killer.
Yeah. I'm sure it wouldn't hurt. Andrew Dunbar, I was reading about the Vietnam Veterinary Corps in World War II. It was interesting. A lot of what they were doing was answer questions like, what is that animal over there? A yak. Long pause. Can we eat it? Thank you, Andrew. So during when you guys were hungry and thirsty, were you guys tempted to? Did you see local game that you were tempted to, or that you did like forage?
Yeah. So when we were at the JDAM site, there were a few homes that had cows, and we were very close to having bacon and a steak. Sorry, not bacon. We're gonna have a steak. Yeah, we don't have cow bacon, but we definitely talked about it, and we were close. But again, remember this time in the war, hearts and minds, right? So they were very hesitant. They said, "We're getting resupplied soon. Just you guys will be fine."
Yeah, hold on a second, Tony. You just nuked the hearts and minds off the face of the planet with 3 JDAMs. I don't think. We're a little past that at this point.
I somehow skipped a couple of the questions. Leon Jones, 12, thank you very much. Were there thoughts early on by people that that the official story wasn't exactly true? Seems like nobody wants to be the guy talk about a mission they weren't on.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have an answer other than, the story that we know is all we have some evidence for other things, but I don't know. I really don't. We've tried to investigate some of the stuff, and you just come up dead end after dead end. So, Marcus was there,
Yeah.
I trust the guy. I mean, I don't think he has any reason to hold on to his story for this long. He told it the best he could.
Right.
In my opinion.
Right. BPA Izzy, thank you very much. Message retracted. You guys must be. BPA Izzy, thank you again. Do you think Big Army could accomplish a special operations missions? We're all had to, regardless of lack of special operational status.
I mean, I think some stuff, but there are certain things that, you know, you have to have specialized training for.
Yeah.
And Rangers, especially, I think were ideal for this specific recovery because of how fast we had to move, not necessarily just getting through the terrain. I think all units could have gotten through the terrain eventually, but the speed we were moving, and I don't know that many units could have moved that fast.
Right.
You know, we train a little bit different than most people back in the States, and it's not just to meet our EIB standards. That's actually considered like the lowest you should ever be.
Right.
If you can't do EIB, you're going to get kicked out of the Ranger Battalion. So, you know, our standard was much higher than the rest of the Army. So, you know, I'm not going to say they couldn't do it, but I would say it would be very different.
Right. Right.
So, is there more questions?
We have more. Interferon Recon, thank you. What would you give and teach units for future mission like yours?
I would basically teach them how to land nav without maps, and how to take care of their feet, and how much water they need to carry. But it would be a lot of, you know, physical training, to be honest, because I mean, I did a lot of stuff, you know, in Ranger School. I went in the winter. I was in Ramadi, but there was nothing like this. I mean, I've climbed a lot of mountains in my life, but with body armor, I've never done anything like this. 9,000 feet with body armor is something else.
Yeah. And you actually, your feet, well, something we didn't talk about, but your foot was actually kind of hamburger by the time you got to the crash site, right?
It wasn't my foot. It was my roommate's.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah.
His foot was completely hamburger. Like when I saw it, I was like horrified.
Yeah.
And all he cared about was he didn't get to go on the next patrol. Like he was pissed.
Yeah.
So he didn't care about his foot.
Tony.
One last one. Sorry. Sorry, guy. And Jackson, thank you very much. How different were our SEAL Team 6 and Delta on target?
I think it depends on the type of target, but I would say where I worked with them was an urban environment. I would say that Delta Force obviously had more training in an urban environment, in my opinion. They seem to be more senior guys, but I worked with Delta in the mountains. I mean, I worked with SEAL Team 6 in the mountains, and those guys moved as well as any others. So, you know, I think it just depends on the environment.
Sure.
Tony, your book is titled Leave No Man Behind. It's out now. Do you have a copy of it to hold up? You show folks?
I do.
Let's see.
I did. And here it is.
Bam. Where can people find it, Tony?
It's available anywhere books are sold. I'm hearing that there's a lot of supply chain issues, but Barnes & Noble, Amazon are all safe bets.
Yeah, it's out of stock. You have out of stock on Amazon right now if you get the physical copy.
But
because it's selling out so well.
The Kindle is not going out of stock.
No, the
you
Kindle,
get the ebook.
that's where I read it. I read it on
Correct.
Kindle. Yeah.
You can get it now.
And Walmart actually has copies too. So Walmart's actually an easy one to get copies.
And there's an audiobook also?
Yeah, the audiobook is also out. Yes.
Cool, right on. So you guys have a lot of options out there. I mean, this story has never really been told before. So I hope that you guys will go and check out Tony's book and hear about the Rangers who are out there that week.
And Tony, now you're a chiropractor now. You went to school. You have a chiropractic practice. You know, Jack was, if you want to plug that, if you want to make that public on here,
Yeah.
you're more than welcome to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at Structural Chiropractic in Redmond, Washington, so it's right outside Seattle. I'm there if you need me. I do complimentary consultations all day long, so if you need help, give me a call.
Boy, you should set up shop just a second battalion, I'm sure, and I mean all that.
It's true.
All that weight. And then do you have products? Do you have a website? Do you sell products that people can go check out?
I sell my book. That's about it.
Okay,
So
fair enough.
My thing is I want to educate people on health. So
Perfect.
I don't have anything to sell you. I don't have anything to show you. Reach out and I'll give you some resources.
And Jack,
drtonybrooks.com.
drtonybrooks.com. And Jack said during the
Dr. Tony Brooks.
drtonybrooks.com.
Yep.
And Jack said that during the bonus segment we talked about Ramadi, but I thought that the unicorn would be a more interesting story if you're up to it, because I think that's a great little slice of life during this this whole thing.
Well, we can get into both of them.
Unicorns.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The unicorn. That's
we'll save that for our bonus section.
Okay. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So, guys, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. All that good stuff. Check out the links down in the description to join our Patreon so you can get access to the bonus segments. We're on Instagram. There's merch. If you check out the link down in the description. And next episode is going to be with Wes Bryant. He was a JTAC. Also wrote a really good book about setting up strike cell operations in Iraq to defeat ISIS. So he's got some awesome stories to tell. We'll be with him next Friday. So I hope you guys will join us.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. So check out Tony's book, Leave No Man Behind, and also his website, drtonnybrooks.com. And if you're a member of our Patreon, you get access to our bonus segment, which we're going to have, which is a little bit of wooing.
Okay. All right, guys. So we'll see you next Friday. Thanks for joining.